Well, good afternoon, everyone. The Supreme Court is meeting in administrative session to consider the budget of the State Bar of Texas, as we do each year at this time. Of course, we know that the past year has been a challenging one for all of us in many respects, and we're anxious to hear the bar's plans going forward. So we'll have the presentation by the leadership of the bar, and then there'll be a time for judges to ask questions, but you can ask questions along the way, of course, if you like. That may be a little difficult because we can't see everybody, but just don't be shy, and I'm sure that will work fine. I'll turn to Justice Lehrman, our liaison to the State Bar, to introduce the afternoon session. Justice Lehrman.
Thank you so much, Chief. I certainly appreciate that. I just want to start out by thanking Trey Apfel and the entire State Bar staff for their conscientious work in everything bar related, but especially on the budget. Every year they put so many hours into this very, very detailed analysis of exactly what has gone on in the past year and what's going to be necessary for the next year. And I know that on behalf of the court, we want to all tell you how much we appreciate the effort that you put into that. It's so important that we're stewards of the money that's entrusted with the State Bar of Texas by the attorneys of the state. And we certainly appreciate those efforts. As the chief said, this has been a particularly difficult year with COVID. And so this is our second year now that we are having to deal with a situation that is somewhat challenging, actually extremely challenging. And hopefully we'll soon be out of this situation, but it's certainly been a challenging task. We have a few oddities this year that we need to keep our minds on, and that is, and our attention to, which is largely deals with the purchase of the new property that, of course, we were consulted on and brought into the loop on that every step of the way. That's something that's going to be reflected in the paperwork that we review today. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Apfel, and thank you again for your conscientious work on this.
Thank you for the kind words, Justice Lehrman. Chief Justice Heck, members of the court, may it please the court. At this time, I'll like to hand it off to President-elect Sylvia Barunda Firth for her comments.
Good afternoon. It's very much an honor to be here with you today. As a 36-year transactional lawyer, appearing before this body is an unexpected honor for me. And I really want to tell you, I wish it could be in person. But it comes to me by virtue of having the role of president-elect who chairs the budget committee. So I'm happy to report to you today that the committee, the State Bar staff, and the leadership have put together a fiscally responsible and a conservative budget. In the budget proposal before you today, the operating revenues and expenditures are decreased by almost $1 million, or 2% from last year's budget, in response to the economic impact of the pandemic and what it has caused to the State Bar and all of our members. With the fiscal year 2020 budget year, the board built up a minimum reserve to our long-term goal of 3 months of operating expenditures, or $11,059,004, which enabled the bar to take advantage of the opportunity to purchase 1415 Lavaca without incurring any debt. Additionally, the current year's budget provided additional assistance to the Technology Fund and established funding for the Law Practice Management Program, to name a couple of our highlights. And this year, the proposed budget would continue the good work of ensuring that the State Bar operates from a position of financial security. The strong operating results from fiscal year 2020 provided the State Bar with approximately $3.3 million in one-time excess funds, of which $1.5 million would be dedicated to replenishing the minimum reserves of the bar. The proposed budget focuses on enhancing the State Bar services to its members and the public while improving the quality of legal services in our state, and Director Apfel will explain that more fully during his presentation. I'd like to go over the State Bar's budgeting process and bring you up to date on the work that's been done to bring us to this meeting with you today. The budget process is extensive. It begins in August of every year and concludes in May with this meeting. The State Bar staff prepared the budget between August and October in consultation with board leadership. The Budget Committee held a planning meeting in September and met again in December to review the proposed budget presented by staff. The committee heard presentations regarding all budgets over $500,000 in revenue and $300,000 in expenses. And after much discussion, the committee approved the budget for submission to the Board of Directors. In January, the Board of Directors approved the fiscal year 2021-22 budget for publication in the March issue of the Texas Bar Journal. Following that, a public hearing on the proposed budget was held remotely by video conference on April 6, 2021. No comments were received or submitted from members of the public. And during the April meeting, the Board of Directors approved the proposed budget for submission to the court. And finally, we're here today to present this budget to you for your consideration. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention and turn over the presentation to Director Apfel for more details on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, President-elect Firth. Also for the members of the court, we have with us today on the call some of our volunteers, not only President-elect Firth, but we have State Bar Chair-elect of the board, Santos Vargas, and also Janine Rispoli, TYLA President-elect. In addition, certainly we have the State Bar of Texas executive staff and our division and department heads present on the call as well. And then I also want to make note that we have Shauna Willing, our Chief Disciplinary Counsel, and Ms. Gina Bunn, who is Chair of the Commission for Lawyer Discipline, and Bobby Ramirez, who is Vice Chair of the Commission for Lawyer Discipline. We also have some of our affiliated groups on the call. Leo Figueroa is the Executive Director of the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. Jenny Hodgkins is with the Executive Director of BOTA, and we have David Gonzalez, Chair of BOTA, on the call, as well as Trish McAllister, our Executive Director of the Texas Access to Justice Commission. So with that, I'll now announce that the purpose of this meeting is to comply with Government Code Section 81.022D, which states that the State Bar of Texas annual budget must be reviewed and approved by the Supreme Court. So today we'll be discussing the overall budgeting process. We'll go over some highlights of the current fiscal year 2021-2022 budget, special initiatives. We'll get into some trends and comparisons. In your packets, there is a 3-year comparison of the budget, highlights of the proposed budget, details on board commitments, membership dues projections, and salary and benefit information. Some of the key members of the budget process that President-elect Firth was talking about was President-elect Firth. She served as chair of the budget committee. Certainly our State Bar staff, led by our Finance Division Director, Tracy Jarrett, and Deputy Executive Director, Ray Cantu. And of course, Justice Deborah Lehrman was very involved in the process as well. The budget process involves the efforts of all departments, including directors and our staff members. So it's truly a team effort. In addition to the president-elect, we have several budget committee members who are shown on the screen now. They include the State Bar President, the Chair of the Board, our Audit and Finance Committee Chair, Alistair Dawson, was very involved in the budget process, as well as Victor Flores, our TYLA immediate past president. And then we had 6 other directors who served as budget committee members. From August through October, the finance division and staff members analyze historical trends and then predict revenue for the upcoming budget cycle. At least 3 years of historical data are used to predict revenues. The budgeted revenues are then projected using a conservative and reasonableness basis. So for example, if there is a reasonable uncertainty regarding whether revenue will be collected, the revenue is not included in the projection. Salary and benefit expenditures are analyzed also using historical trends and projected costs. Expenditures are budgeted using what we call an incremental budgeting approach. This is a commonly used approach because it controls costs and provides for a stable budget. The budget submitted for programs must be the same as last year. Any increase to the budget must be justified and then approved by the executive director. For the general fund of the State Bar, the total operating expenses must not exceed the total operating revenues. This practice controls costs since they must be limited to revenues. Throughout our budgeting process, the strategic goals of the State Bar are always in mind. The purpose of the State Bar, according to the State Bar Act, Section 81.012, and the mission statement of the State Bar are always considered. Cost savings and potential operating efficiencies are also considered. The budget process is an extensive process that begins in August of each year and concludes at this May meeting before the court. As President-elect Firth went through this process with you, it's a 7-step process. The heavy lifting, as I like to call it, takes place at that December 2020 meeting that President-elect Firth talked about. That's where the Budget Committee approves submitting the proposed budget to the Board of Directors. This meeting is an extensive meeting. It lasts the entirety of a day. Presentations are made to the Budget Committee on all budgets over $500,000 in revenue and $300,000 in expenditures. And then steps 4, 5, and 6 that are shown on the screen are all opportunities for comment from the public or from membership, especially the public hearing that was held on the budget on April 6, 2021. At that meeting, no public comment was brought forth. So we moved on to our April board meeting, at which time the proposed budget was approved for submission to the Supreme Court. The State Bar's general fund is our operating fund. Approximately 90% of the revenues are deposited to this fund, and approximately 90% of expenditures are paid out of the fund. The State Bar's proposed fiscal year 21-22 general fund budget includes revenues and receipts from reserves totaling $45,071,583. It also includes an equal amount of expenditures, transfers out, and proposed board commitments resulting in a balanced budget. In a moment, we'll talk more about receipts from reserves and board commitments and how those two tie together. So when excluding the receipts from reserves, the annual revenue, the operating annual revenue decreased in this budget by $986,374 or 2%. That's less than last year's budget. The expenditures and transfers also decreased by the same amount relative to last year's budget. This chart presents the proposed budgeted operating revenue as presented on page 2 of the official budget or page 3 of your budget packet. You'll see that membership dues continues to account for half of the revenue generated at the State Bar. Membership dues revenue is budgeted to increase in this budget by $144,000 based on membership trends and analytical procedures. A detailed analysis of those membership dues is included in your packet. Texas Bar CLE revenue has decreased by 5.6% or $798,000 compared to last year's budget. The pandemic has impacted Texas Bar CLE revenues during this fiscal year or fiscal year 2020-2021, and we anticipate impacts to continue through at least the first quarter of the proposed budget year as we transition from online or webcast to in-person CLE events. There's also a 10-year comparison of revenues for Texas Bar CLE, which is included in your packet. MCLE fees, you'll see, over a third of our MCLE fees are for attorney non-compliance fees. Approximately 8,000 attorneys per year pay $100, $200, or $300 in fees for non-compliance with CLE requirements. Sponsor accreditation fees account for more than a third of MCLE fees, which cover the costs of accounting for and maintaining CLE credit hours provided by sponsors. Other fees include attorney reinstatement fees and late filing fees for sponsor accreditation. The category Other Bar revenue includes streams that account for about 11% of the bar's total revenues. These are member benefits revenues, bar journal, and website advertising revenues, CDC fees, and advertising review fees. We do have an other revenue category, and that's detailed in the following slide, as you'll see. Bar journal and website revenue primarily consists of the sale of advertisements printed in the bar journal and posted on texasbar.com. This category also includes royalties from your membership, a company that hosts and promotes the Career Center on texasbar.com. So dealing with the looking at the budgeted revenue or other revenue slide. That's the next slide. You'll see that this slide presents a breakout of the types of revenue included in the pie chart that we listed as other revenue. The investment income target of $100,000 is expected due to investment yields decreasing significantly over the past year. For example, by comparison, this past year, we had budgeted $400,000 for investment income, but we realized $800,000 for investment income. Obviously, this next budget year is going to be more challenging, so we will be paying very close attention to that. We have other smaller revenue categories that are presented here for your review. The next slide talks about a 3-year comparison of budgeted revenue by major category. So this chart indicates that most revenue trends of the general fund remain stable or have steady, slow growth over the past 3 years. CLE revenues, as I mentioned a moment ago, are projected to decrease by 5.6% when compared to this current fiscal year. The revenues are expected to recover in the future once the pandemic comes to a halt. This slide represents the budgeted general fund expenditures. So a moment ago, we looked at a pie chart showing expected budgeted revenues. This shows the converse of that, the budgeted expenditures by strategic plan area. These figures are generalized and show how the expenditures comply with the purpose of the State Bar according to Texas Government Code Section 81.012, subsections 1 through 7. and the mission statement of the State Bar. Service to members and protection of the public continue to be the core functions of the State Bar and comprise 66% of the budgeted expenditures, and that's the way it should be. Financial management and sound administration costs represent another 22% of the total budget. Next slide. Some of the key offices that carry out the strategic mission of protection of the public and service to the public are listed on this slide for informational purposes. As you can see, protection of the public includes the Chief Disciplinary Counsel, the unauthorized practice of law, grievance oversight, BOTA, client security fund, and our CAP program. And then service to the public includes our law-related education program, TYLA, lawyer referral, public information, and customer service. This chart shows expenditure trends of the general fund by division for the current proposed budget as compared to the prior 2 fiscal years approved budgets. This is a graphic presentation of page 2 of the official proposed budget. Committed expenditures, which is the last column shown on the far right under board commitments, vary from year to year since it is a spend down of the prior year's excess funds remaining from operations. This is where the receipts from reserves comes from. That's what we're talking about here. This year, the board and the Supreme Court, as Justice Lehrman mentioned, authorized the purchase of the 1415 Lavaca property for $3.5 million, which accounts for the high board commitment amount during fiscal year 2021. That shows the spike there in the yellow or gold column. In an effort to replenish those minimum reserves, this budget for fiscal year 21-22 includes an amount of $1.5 million to rebuild those minimum reserves and will not be spent, which accounts for the low expenditure for fiscal year 21-22 budget year in board commitments. We anticipate that as the bar reopens and holds in-person events, the expenditures will continue the trend of slow, controlled growth that is consistent with our revenue intake. So over the past 20 years, the total number of active attorneys has increased from year to year. The total number increased by 50% from fiscal year 03 to fiscal year 22, from roughly 71,000 to approximately 106,000. However, the growth rate of active attorneys has slowed in recent years to about 1% each year. Although the State Bar serves more attorneys, the total number of employees has decreased over that same time frame by 9%. This is as a result of the State Bar's continued efforts to realize operational efficiencies and control staff growth. Additional details on changes in full-time equivalents are available in the budget highlights section of your packet. This slide presents 10 years of budgeted salary expenditures. You'll see over the past 10 years, salaries have increased slowly. For fiscal year 21-22, the budgeted salaries have decreased by 2% when compared to the salaries budgeted for fiscal year 2021. The decrease in salaries is primarily because employees' base salaries have not increased during the pandemic, but remain the same as the year 2019-2020. In addition to this, the bar has experienced certain employee turnover of certain director positions. New employees have been hired to replace those positions at lower salaries, which also has had the effect of generating savings. Additionally, one position, an appellate attorney, is now contracted and classified professional services. That's it. Next one. This chart presents a comparison of budgeted salaries compared to the total budgeted operating expenditures of the bar. Again, you'll see that over the past 10 years, this trend has remained very stable, right at around 41% to 42% of total budgeted expenditures and transfers. This proposed budget would bring total budgeted salaries in at 41% of total budgeted operating expenditures and transfers. We also have additional detailed salary information that's included in the budget packet. I want to talk to you just briefly about our access to justice budget allocation. This fiscal year 2022 budget includes approximately $3.5 million in total general fund spending for access to justice efforts. The state bar provides various forms of aid for lawyers. However, the legal access department provides the majority of this service, that total being over $1.5 million. Some of the major programs of the Legal Access Division include free online legal research to qualifying pro bono attorneys, the funding of the student loan repayment program administered by the Access to Justice Foundation, the language line, which is also called the communication access line or for translation services, and also malpractice insurance for lawyers providing qualifying pro bono services. Additionally, the Access to Justice Commission is budgeted to spend approximately $686,000, and other state bar departments will provide assistance primarily in the amount of $736,000, consisting of complimentary CLE scholarships and free access to the Texas Bar CLE online library and classroom during fiscal year 2022. The budget also includes the $515,000 payment for the student loan repayment assistance program, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide. And with this slide, I'd like to highlight the significant achievements of the Champions of Justice Gala benefiting veterans hosted by the Texas Access to Justice Commission, which raises funds to provide legal services to low-income Texas veterans through programs funded by the Texas Access to Justice Foundation. For 11 years, Harry Reesner, Trish McAllister, and her team have worked hard to put this gala on and have raised over $4.8 million over the 11 years of the galas. Since 2012, the State Bar has partnered with the commission by covering all of the expenses of the gala so that 100% of the proceeds raised could go directly to benefit veterans. In the past few years, the State Bar has contributed close to $50,000 each year to help cover those costs of the gala. We have provided a 5-year history on this chart for you that shows the total actual costs incurred in support of this cause. And in support, well, for the current budget year, the gala was once again held remotely due to the pandemic. The silver lining is that the costs usually incurred to hold the meeting were not incurred. So we decided to go ahead and contribute the remaining budget to this cause in the amount of $45,000. So with the State Bar contribution, the total funds raised by the gala this year were $491,500. And going forward, the fiscal year 2022 budget includes another $50,000 of expenditures to help cover the costs of this event. This is obviously a significant achievement and a very successful program administered by our Access to Justice Commission. Next, we get into some of the budget highlights. Some of this information is also included in your budget packet. We don't include all of them in this slide presentation, but we wanted to hit on some highlights, as we like to call them. Included in the budget is a $500,000 operating transfer to the Client Security Fund and a $400,000 board commitment to the client security fund. And this will be funded over a 2-year period. Several years back, our policy manual required us to make an annual transfer of $300,000 to the client security fund. Over the years, we saw the amount that was being paid out outpaced that $300,000 appropriation, and we kept having to add to the client security fund. So over the last 3 years, I believe, we have made it a point to make sure that there was some sort of transfer either from the general fund or general fund plus board commitment to the client security fund, totaling at least $700,000 on an annual basis. So we've made sure that we've been able to do that again in this budget. The budget also includes annual transfers to our technology fund and the capital equipment replacement plan pursuant to board policy. We also have a 5-year cash flow projection of these funds that is included in your packet. Then next I want to talk to you about transfers to reserves and board commitments. The next 2 topics cover the allocation of our net excess from fiscal year 2020's operations. This is the receipts from reserves that we talked about earlier on in the presentation. The audit for fiscal year 19-20 has been completed, and the total amount of net excess from operations from that year was $3,366,405. That excess, in addition to a recommitment or reclassification of 2 prior board commitments of $966,667, results in an amount available as unassigned funds of $4,333,072. The following sections, transfers to reserves and board commitments, discuss the assignment of the $4.3 million in funding. So first, talking about transfers to reserves. So instead of designating funds for an expense out of this net excess, this budget has set aside $1.5 million to replenish the level of our minimum reserves that we utilize to purchase the Lavaca property from 2.1 months to 2.5 months of operating expenditures, bringing our total amount held in reserves now to $9,140,350. The board policy manual requires the state bar to maintain minimum reserves at a level of between 2 to 4 months of operating expenditures. And obviously, these reserves are important to help ensure not only the long-term financial stability of the bar, but also to give the bar flexibility when it comes to opportunities such as the Lavaca property. Board commitments represent one-time expenditures from the excess of prior year's operations. So we utilize that net operating excess or receipts from reserves, and we utilize our board in order to commit those funds to areas that are in need of certain funding. This year, the board commitments include, as we've talked about previously, the $515,000 to the student loan repayment plan. The board has funded this plan at this level for the last 10 years. And attorneys are eligible for this program if they work full-time for Texas legal aid programs that meet certain requirements. Next, we have a commitment of $513,000 to our tech fund. This commitment funds in part the procurement of a new chief disciplinary counsel case management software. The current Justware case management software used by CDC for the past 8 years is being unexpectedly sunset by its vendor Journal Tech. The information technology team is working with CDC to do a full evaluation of Journal Tech's new software, as well as other competitors, to ensure that we find the best and most cost-effective system on the market. This software currently supports all of CDC functions and is vital to its operations. The current system also supports all of the UPL, or unauthorized practice of law, committee caseload and data exchanges between CDC and BOTA. There's also a commitment of $500,000 to support Lavaca building repairs / renovations, as we're calling it. The exact amount needed for necessary renovations or repairs obviously is not known at this time. However, this reserve will provide funds to cover these expenses as they become necessary. Any funds not needed for these purposes may be recommitted by the board at a later time for other purposes. We also show a $500,000 commitment to support the operational expenses related to the Lavaca building. This commitment is being requested to maintain a 2-year reserve account for operating expenses associated with that purchase. Anticipated expenses include utilities, security, maintenance, and other operating expenses. We have listed also a $400,000 commitment to the Client Security Fund. As stated earlier, this commitment will be funded over a 2-year period in the amount of $200,000 per year, in addition to the $500,000 annual transfer from the general fund described above. This commitment would make the amount available for payment of claims equal to $700,000 for this fiscal year. Next, we have a $250,000 commitment for our State Bar's legal reserve. This will help establish a reserve for possible payments for outside legal counsel in the event of additional litigation, and this brings our total legal reserve to $350,000. Next is a $114,674 commitment to our State Bar's reserve for insurance. This funds potential payment of additional insurance premiums or expenses. These one-time expenses help ensure appropriate coverage for the bar. We have a $25,000 commitment to replenish the reserve for presidential initiatives. This commitment will raise our balance for future presidential initiatives to approximately $200,000. And then last on your list is a $15,000 commitment that will allow, we will host the ABA Young Lawyers Division Summit event. The ABA Young Lawyers Division Mountain West Summit is a meeting held annually that involves young lawyer divisions from across the Mountain West states, such as Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico, Nevada, and Arizona. And the summit provides an opportunity for TYLA to showcase its award-winning projects to young lawyers from other states. State Bar sections, a quick word about that. The bar offers free full service accounting to our 47 sections. Currently, 42 of the 47 sections take advantage of the use of our accounting services provided by the bar. The in-house accounting services help aid the bar in preparing for our audits, segregating duties, and providing guidance and assistance to our section treasurers. State Bar's internal auditors, McConnell and Jones LLP, just completed an audit of the State Bar's sections this last year. We were very appreciative of the hard work completed by our section volunteers, and the result was a positive and full report. The report concluded that overall, the State Bar sections have implemented sound controls and processes to protect their financial assets, including segregation of duty controls. The report also noted some areas for improvement of management's internal controls for some sections to enhance their effectiveness, which management is working with those sections to tighten up those controls. We were very pleased with the results and with the tremendous commitment our sections have showed to adhere to best practices and financial responsibility. The State Bar's financial opinion audit was performed for fiscal year 2019-2020 by the CPA firm Weaver. This audit's purpose was to provide assurance that the annual financial report presents the financial position of the State Bar fairly. In other words, the statements are free of material misstatements. In order to provide an opinion on the financial statements, the auditors test certain controls over financial operations and target financial areas that generate a significant amount of revenue or expense, and review asset and liability controls and reporting. The auditors concluded that the financial statements comply with generally accepted accounting principles that are recognized in the United States, and the bar received what's termed an unmodified opinion, which is the best financial audit opinion the State Bar can receive. This is the first year that Weaver has conducted the financial opinion audit for the State Bar. Previously, we used the firm RSM. The completion of the audit in the midst of a pandemic was nothing short of remarkable. I can tell you that it created a significant challenge for us, and I am proud of the effort that our staff made to complete the audit while under remote working conditions. Additionally, the State Bar's internal auditors, McConnell and Jones, examined controls and processes of the State Bar in accordance with our internal audit plan, and they reported it to the entire board. So for this year, the internal auditors focused on 3 areas of the bar. Number 1, compliance with the Public Funds Investment Act. 2, the Chief Disciplinary Counsel Office's internal controls and compliance. And then lastly, the internal controls over sections, finances, and compliance with board policy. The audits concluded that controls over operations were generally effective to provide reasonable assurance that risks are being managed and objectives should be met. The detailed reports, recommendations, and management responses can be viewed at any time online. In an effort to keep the State Bar transparent, we have posted 5 years of past budgets and financial statement history, as well as 3 prior years of internal audit reports on the Our Finances webpage of our website. And a link is provided on this slide down at the bottom. So this concludes the State Bar's presentation of the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. We want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Apfel, for that very thorough presentation of the budget. Any questions from the court?
Chief Justice Heck, this is Justice Guzman. I do have a question.
Yes.
I first want to thank Trey Apfel for his strong leadership and the excellent presentation, as well as your support for the bar's continued support for access to justice. I have a question on the Lavaca building. So there's $500,000 budgeted for repairs, and you indicated what you would do if that was too much. Is there any concern that that's not enough? And thank you again for your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question, Justice Guzman. There is, again, we're kind of wading off into the unknown. Most, if not all of our efforts up to this point has been simply with a due diligence process in mind to make sure that we should and could go forward with the purchase. Now that we've closed, our plan is to reach out to experts in the industry, so to speak, help us evaluate and assess the potential for the building in terms of office space, meeting space, or any other purpose that we might find suitable for the building, and then we will proceed accordingly. We plan to proceed cautiously. We want to stay conservative with our plans at this point. We don't want to get out over our skis, as they say, but we will move cautiously. We will make sure we are being prudent with our planning, and we will certainly be glad to keep the court in the loop in terms of where we're going moving forward.
Other questions?
Yes, Chief.
Yes, Justice Blackwell.
Mr. Appel, I noticed there was a password protected document that I think maybe contains some information about employee salaries. And I can get that password, I'm sure, but I just wondered, aren't those salaries public the way other state employee salaries are, or is there some other privacy protection that covers them?
Justice Blacklock, if the information is requested under an open records request, they will be provided to whomever requests those. In this particular instance, in working with the court, we just wanted to make sure that there was a password protected transmittal of the information so that you would have it available to you.
Okay, but it is public information.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Others?
I'm just curious, Mr. Atfield, why do we have two different auditing firms, one for the financial statements and one for the internal controls?
Same time sometimes.
So we try and have a division of responsibilities, and we felt it more transparent to have two different auditing firms look at certain aspects of the bar, so that we don't have one auditing firm that is doing all of the work for the state bar. That way, we're able to say we're utilizing resources that are available to us at different times. Also, in addition, this past year, these two audits were going on at the same time. So we again felt it appropriate to have two different firms heading off in different directions on that.
Does the internal control auditor share with the auditor the financial statements recommendations that they might make to management about improvements to internal controls?
Yes.
Tracy, you want to answer that? Let me call on our finance division director, because she's got the auditing background on that, and she can probably answer that much better than I. It's Tracy Jarrett.
Hi, Justice Bland. Trey is absolutely right on your question before. There's a conflict of interest if an auditor, keep them separate so the audits aren't auditing each other's work. But yes, and they do share information with each audit firm. So we give the results of the financial audit to the internal auditors, and the financial auditors look at the internal audit reports as well. Yeah.
Questions?
I had one, Mr. Appel. Thanks again for the, as my colleagues have said, for the informative presentation, and also for the bar's continuing commitment to access to justice, which we really appreciate. I had a question about the operations cost for the Lavaca building, the $500,000 there. Is that anticipated to be a one-time reserve for those expenses, and then the operations expenses for the Lavaca building will be rolled into the whatever y'all would normally budget for operations for all the facilities in future years, or how is that expected to work?
We hope it'll be a one-time allocation, and then we have the Texas Law Center Fund, which we provide. We make an annual transfer to that for various, depreciation issues, maintenance issues, replacement issues with the law center. And then we may, with the Lavaca property, we may either roll that into the Texas Law Center Fund, or we may establish a separate Lavaca property fund that we will also allocate funds to on an as-needed basis going forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you again, Mr. Apfel, and we appreciate the good presentation as always. And President-elect Firth, we appreciate your work on this and your contributions and your presentation this afternoon, which was very good, even for a 36-year practice commercial lawyer, first time in the Supreme Court. We appreciated your overview of the process. So we will take the proposed budget under advisement, and if we have any other questions, occasionally we do, we'll get them to you, but expect to have a decision very shortly. And I'll just say again, I'm watching the profession struggle through the last year with issues that have really challenged every way that we deliver legal services to the people who need them. You can't help but be proud of the legal profession for the innovation and determination that they have brought to the to all of that. And I get to see quite a bit that's going on around the country, and nobody's done it any better than the State Bar of Texas. So thanks to all of you, to the board, for your hard work and for this presentation. If there's nothing else, then the court will stand adjourned.